Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And we're through week 9 of NFL football. And since we're halfway through, we're going to recap all of week 9's games. There's a lot to go through, so we're just going to jump right into it. Tim, are you ready to go?
You know it. Let's run it.
Halfway done. Starting with the Tennessee Titans and the Pittsburgh Steelers on Thursday Night Football, where the Steelers inched out a 20-16 victory with a game-winning drive. Kenny Pickett engineered it. He's been okay, but the main story for the Steelers is on the positive side, the running backs with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren each having solid days in their own right.
Are you kidding? Deontay Johnson found the end zone.
I was gonna talk about.
This is the first time in 600 days or something.
Yeah,
it's been since 2021.
Yeah, but touchdown regression, whatever. I was more so gonna talk about George Pickens with the Steelers receiving core and how that has turned into an absolute disaster.
It was a weird one. I mean, he's been solid for a decent part of the season, but then he just gets negative receiving yards. That's a first.
2 catches on 5 targets for a -1 receiving yards. I or anybody watching at home had more receiving yards than George Pickens in this game.
Add that to the resume.
And then there was drama where, he posts on his Instagram, "Free me." Is that another Steelers wide receiver wanting out of Pittsburgh and following the age-old tradition, or George Pickens just being a weird dude like George Pickens?
I just think that's George Pickens being George Pickens. We all know how
George Pickens is a strange guy.
Yeah, I was trying to find a bit of a better way to put it, but I mean, everybody knows his iconic picture from his draft day of him standing in front of the TV like.
Bro's posted up.
We've known that he is a character in many different ways. So I'm not particularly surprised that he had a pretty emotional response to some of his recent struggles with the Steelers in terms of receiving. But I mean, overall, not a very pretty game for them. Other than you talk about, great to get the running backs involved, but overall, not their best game.
A win.
We've said before, a win's a win. Exactly.
Yeah, and you take those. And
of course, especially in this AFC.
On the other side, Will Levis in his second start, not nearly as well as his first. You're not going to light up the NFL for 3 TDs, but it was enough for the Titans to name him the full-time starter going forward. So they see enough in his development. Tannehill goes to the bench. Levis starts in the future. Tim, what do you make of this?
I mean, I completely agree with the decision. I think not only with, giving the rookie a chance, he performs well his first game, his second game. I would argue that the Steelers defense, much tougher defense. The Steelers have quite a bit of talent across the board, even though they don't always play like an elite defense. They have the playmakers to any given day if they, turn it on the right time. So I don't. But I mean, at the end of the day, he did move the ball. A lot of times that's more than Ryan Tannehill could say that he did. So he may not have found the end zone through the air. They only got their 1 touchdown on the ground. But he did pass for 262 yards, only had the 1 interception. I think there's a lot of room for growth with a guy that young and a guy with that kind of arm talent. They're not getting basically any of that from Tannehill. So I completely agree with the decision.
Yeah, and with Tannehill being on an expiring contract, certainly not going to be on the roster. You have Will Levis and Malik Willis if you really, really need it going forward. I think what we see from Will Levis is, you're absolutely right, a guy that shows the flashes. Still inconsistent. The concerns from college are still there, but
But again, that's what you want out of a rookie quarterback. You want the flashes. So because the fact that he's already shown flashes in, his first 2 starts, and it's also not with, you talk about not the most talented receiving core. Obviously you've got aging D-Hop, but other than that, I mean,
Nick Westbrook-Ikhine.
Yeah, and Kyle Phillips. I mean, he's even making Kyle Phillips have a decent amount of yardage, which Kyle Phillips never gets yards. I think I saw something like going into this game, he had 100-something career receiving yards.
The Steelers at 5-3 are in the midst of the playoff picture. They go and host the Green Bay Packers, where they will most certainly get diced up by Jordan Love. And the Tennessee Titans at 3-5 will head to Tampa Bay to play the Buccaneers. Up next, we'll head to Frankfurt, Germany to talk about the Miami Dolphins and Kansas City Chiefs. The Dolphins have this problem where they can't beat teams with a winning record, and that proved itself today. They had a nice little comeback there at the end, but just sloppy play overall was the Dolphins' undoing, and the Chiefs pulled away and won 21-14. There was some interesting plays in there. The Chiefs had that scoop and score on that forced fumble from Tyreek Hill. And at the very end, you saw some errant throws from Tua that has been really uncharacteristic this season. And then him botching the snap and, that resulting in a turnover on downs. So the Dolphins have a lot of questions to answer. Yeah, you can beat up on the bad teams, but the record versus like teams with winning records and teams with losing records is really, it's kind of concerning.
Yeah, the drop off is significant, and that's very concerning for a team that wants to compete in such a very, very talented AFC. At the moment, it looks like they'll be a team that can make the playoffs, and then will get either beat up in the first round or second round, depending on who they play and how they play. One of the things that I'm not sure that I like too much about this Dolphins team is when they're having great success, it's because Tyreek Hill has been on another planet. And then when Tyreek Hill gets, limited even a decent amount. I mean, he had 8 receptions for 62 yards. That's not bad. It's by Tyreek standards, that's being contained. That, says something about just how good of a receiver he is. But it seems like they're living and dying too much sometimes by essentially just how much Tyreek Hill can torch a defense. And you got to give Kansas City credit. Anytime a team is able to limit Tyreek Hill and keep him from really, well, not only finding the end zone over the top, but also just not letting them run entirely through him. That's a really good job on their part.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You got to give credit to the Chiefs defense for limiting that dynamic offense. It's not like the Chiefs themselves had a really good day offensively in any right.
Not by their standards, no.
Pedestrian numbers for superstars like Mahomes and Travis Kelce and, the rest of the guys.
Extremely pedestrian numbers from Travis Kelce, especially based on what we're used to seeing. I mean, 3 receptions, 14 yards. You're not used to seeing that out of a guy like Travis Kelce, especially when their offense is so used to running through him.
Well, Tim, his lady friend, didn't make the trip to Germany, so I think we can blame
Well,
that.
I'm tired of talking about it, so I ain't gonna mention it.
That's okay. And for these two teams, they both have chances to rest, regenerate, and get refocused for Week 11 because the Chiefs at 7-2 and the Dolphins at 6-3 are heading into the bye week. Next up, you have the Los Angeles Rams and the Green Bay Packers, where we won a game. Let's go. I don't care that it was against Brett Rippon,
who, by the way, is not even a Ram anymore. That's how below average he played.
Yeah.
They're like, you're done.
He got cut. He did not have a great day by any standards. But that defense played well. I'm taking it with a grain of salt. The defense did what they were supposed to do, and the offense actually unleashed Aaron Jones, 24 touches, contributed a touchdown in the first half. That was big.
First half touchdowns.
Dude, but there's still
it's crazy when you have to celebrate that, but you got to take the little things.
You know what? I'm celebrating anything I can get because
I don't blame you.
We've had the highs and we've had the lows, and there's still plenty to clean up. I think this was one of Jordan Love's finer games, but it's not perfect. It's not as bad as everybody says he is. They just want to see him fail because, whatever. But I think the more concerning part is definitely the discipline, whether it be the false starts on the 2 love shoves from John Runyon. And yes, that is our name for the quarterback sneak. We don't do tush pushes, we do love shoves. So we can market that and brand it in Titletown. But I
That's the
mean,
thing. And they weren't false starts. They were offensive offsides, which is so weird because you rarely ever see that
that
called, and they
too.
called it twice in that
That
one.
too.
It was just really weird. Lining up too close to the center, not off. I don't know. I don't particularly agree with it, but I guess rules are rules and they'll
Even
call it as
though
they
the
see it.
Rams
So
nose tackle was like darn near touching Josh Myers' helmet, but
this is why I'm not an NFL ref.
yeah, no. Well, you know what? I think you do a better job than the actual NFL refs that we have, but who's to say? People like to complain about the refs. I won't complain too much in this one. False starts or offsides aside,
I mean,
a
it
win is
changed a little bit of the game, but not very much. I mean, overall,
not
from
really.
based on what you and I saw, and for anyone out there, Drew and I actually got to watch this game together, which was
Woohoo!
fun.
Never actually
But
sat down and watched a Packers game with me, so I'm sure that was an experience for you.
it was quite an experience to watch the ever so slight penalty filled rage at times. But I think some of the things that I noticed personally, especially from the Packers offense, is they did a good job. Jordan Love did a good job spreading the ball around. You get multiple receptions by a lot of different receivers. The one guy that was pretty much the non-factor, other than his one reception for 37 yards, was Christian Watson, which is a little bit concerning considering he's supposed to be arguably the most physically talented, gifted wide receiver on that team.
I don't know where it at.
And yeah, I don't know where it's at either. But like you said, great for them to actually finally get Aaron Jones involved like he should, which I think proves that the Packers do believe that he is fully healthy now and embrace that. He didn't have a super, efficient day on the ground, but he found the end zone. They used him early and often. So it was good to see him back in action. I don't even think there's really much to say about the Rams. When you're led by Brett Rippon, there's not much you
No.
can do. There's not much they did do, as shown by their 3 points.
Yeah, I will say though, the way our 7th-round rookie Carrington Valentine played
He held his
against
own.
Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua was something of highlight. And even Jair Alexander with that bad back was able to, still compete and not lock down
multiple
per
corners.
se,
Both of
but
them made
they
significant
did make
noteworthy
plays.
plays where you could see it be like that was a good play. Which sometimes with corners that kind of gets lost just because oftentimes they're just trying to stick with the receiver. But multiple had plays on the ball, trying to jump passes. So overall, a very, I think, a pretty solid performance all around. Even though it's against a struggling team.
Look, don't care. We won.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to continue it next week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're sitting at 3-5. We're not that far out of the playoff picture. I'm not talking playoffs yet because we got a rough stretch coming up, which includes Pittsburgh, the Chargers, the Lions, and then the Chiefs. So
see how you guys fare with those couple.
Yeah, I think if we go 2-2, we're in good shape. But the Rams have the opportunity to get Matthew Stafford healthy, who they sorely missed. And if he can't go, it's Carson Wentz's show in week 11.
Carson Wentz. What a time is that is going to be if Carson Wentz has to start week 11.
What a time to be alive.
Honestly, I saw something. What a full circle moment it would be after the Rams drafted Jared Goff.
Yeah.
The one pick above him. In the draft, they trade Jared Goff away, and then they bring in Wentz, trying to find a new home. So we'll see how that ends up. I mean, I think the one thing that would be interesting to see is if Wentz has to start for the Rams, I think he immediately has 2 of his most talented receivers that he's ever played with, because he never really played with like super high level wide receivers on any of the teams he's played with. So it'd be an interesting of note. I'm not saying that I think he would actually be a good quarterback, but
I mean,
it'd be
don't get
intriguing.
me wrong, Commanders fans would be screaming about how good Terry McLaurin is, but like everything else Commanders fans say, we don't listen. But
I'd like to see the evidence of how elite Terry McLaurin has been.
That's neither here nor there. We got to move on. The next game we have is the Chicago Bears against the New Orleans Saints. And it seemed like this game shouldn't have been as close as it was, but it was only 24-17. The big thing of note for me is that the Saints won the turnover battle so handily. They forced
That was
three
so
interceptions
close
from
though.
Tyson Bagent and a pair of fumbles as well, but they only won by a touchdown. And the Bears didn't force any turnovers at all. So
Yeah.
typically, I don't quite know what happened for the Saints and or why they couldn't put the Bears away, but that's concerning.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you win the turnover battle, first of all, just winning the turnover battle is important. But to really annihilate the other team in turnover battle and still have it be such a close game, I think part of it was just general offensive inefficiency. I think they were able to get, three touchdowns through the air, two from Carr, one from Taysom Hill near the goal line. But overall it was like either their drives ended really fast or they went down the field and found the end zone. Um, Other than that, I think it's just the quick turnovers for the Bears, stuff like that. Where I mean, yeah, I think the fact that they were even close in that game was astounding. They really shouldn't have been, but we'll see what happens as for the Bears as Justin Fields starts getting close to his return. There's not an official time window as far
He's
as
day
I've
to
seen in
day.
terms of he's still day to day. And then if I'm not mistaken, I believe Khalil Herbert should also be coming back from his high ankle sprain potentially this upcoming week if he continues to spring together a couple of healthy practices.
The Bears are getting their reinforcements with Khalil Herbert. Whether it's Fields or Bagent, that doesn't really matter because they play the Carolina Panthers on Thursday Night
Yeah,
Football.
I hope it shouldn't matter.
Oh boy, the struggling Carolina Panthers at that. So we'll see how they respond. The Saints, on the other hand, at 5-4, head to Minneapolis to play the Vikings, and that's a fantastic segue to talk about those very same Vikings because
Oh
how
man.
in the world did that happen? I,
Oh,
I, I don't get it.
I don't either.
With
I
Jaron
was
Hall
astounded.
starting and Josh Dobbs literally never having taken a practice snap for the Vikings, you get
Bef-
you get
Before we get too far in for the Vikings, though, Jaron Hall did not look bad in his first drive while he was in. I mean, 5 for 6, 78 yards before he got knocked out with the concussion. I was kind of surprised by that. But then Josh Dobbs came and he did
pretty
his
much
thing.
took the job. Yeah, that's all he knew how to do was his thing,
Yeah,
whatever the world that means. And I mean, the Josh Dobbs slander has to stop.
it
Like
does.
at this point, with the journey that he's been through, going Cleveland twice to Detroit to Tennessee to Arizona to Minnesota, and I'm not even sure that I got that order right. I definitely didn't, but that just proves to
Close
show
enough.
how crazy his journey's been over the last however many. And to think that the Pittsburgh Steelers could have Josh Dobbs, but no, they decided to go with guys like Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett anyway. So haha, Steelers big dumb.
Can't
Either
forget
what,
Mitch Trubisky,
yeah, but like Mitch Trubisky's the GOAT, clearly. So like
the MVP.
he is in an elite conversation in his own. It's not Joe Flacco elite. It's is Mitch Trubisky elite. But back to Josh Dobbs,
Yep.
20 of 30 for 158, two touchdowns, and 7 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown on the ground.
Hey,
He's
if he didn't know where the receivers were going, screw it, just take off.
just run. And
Yeah.
like he put his head down and got yards and willed the Vikings to a 31-28 victory, which I think is just as much of an indictment to Arthur Smith and the Falcons as it is compliment to the Vikings, because there's two sides to every coin, and oh how miraculous this was from Josh Dobbs. This was equally as damning for the Falcons, because how in
For
the
a
world
Falcons
did you let
defense
this
that had been
happen?
this Falcons defense also hasn't been bad for a lot of this year. They've been a relatively highly ranked defense by a decent amount of metrics throughout the NFL. So for them to give up this, especially the Falcons scored 28 points. That was a lot more than their offense has scored in a lot of games recently. So it's
but
like,
tim
cool, that's great. Now you just
but
have to defend a
tim
quarterback that hasn't played with this team. Oh, wait, you can't.
and on offense, Bijan Robinson is more of a factor when he doesn't have the ball in his hands than when he does. He he makes guys have to guard him off the ball. So, that's the impact that Bijan Robinson has on your team.
That's why they drafted him.
What, 7th overall
to
pick?
throw him out on the field as a distraction.
As a decoy. The genius Arthur Smith, who has come up with such brilliant plays as Jonnu Smith throwing to Michael Pruitt and having it absolutely not work. But I mean,
blows my mind.
Yeah, no, it absolutely blows my mind. And I don't quite get it. And to think that the Falcons are still hovering around that 500, still hovering around that playoff bubble spot. Do I get it?
Crazy.
No,
welcome to the NFC and welcome to the NFC South.
Yeah, congratulations. The Vikings at 5-4, they'll play the Saints, and the Falcons at 4-5 will take a trip to the desert to play the Arizona Cardinals, where they got blanked against the Browns, and it wasn't pretty, but we're not surprised.
When you have Clayton Tune at the helm,
hey now,
and
an
also already very beat up Arizona Cardinals team. You talk about they're obviously still without Zach Ertz. They're still without James Conner. They don't have anything going for them.
We don't need to point out the obvious. It's like, look at the little sisters of the poor. Look at how poor they are. We know that they're bad,
the
dog.
Little sisters of the poor.
But
that's cruel.
Am I wrong?
I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I mean, they're trying.
The Cardinals, well, you know what? The Cardinals are trying, and we're not even going to talk about what they did in this game, because the important thing is that Kyler Murray's coming back next week. So
that'll be interesting. I'm very intrigued to see what that will look like. What version of Kyler Murray will we see? Because that's always, a big question for quarterbacks coming off of significant injuries.
Better than it has in the last 9 weeks.
It can't look worse. So
you can't get worse than not scoring. You can only be the same by not scoring again. But
and I definitely don't predict that. Maybe we'll see some increased production in Marquise Brown, because they've been known to have
goal.
I would hope they can get at least one.
3 points.
That's a start. That's a start.
Is my over under 3 points, and I'm comfortably taking the over.
On the opposite side, though, for the Browns, I mean, Deshaun Watson looked pretty decent, but again, I mean, when your offense, or when your defense is putting your offense in pretty good positions, that certainly helps. I'd say the only noteworthy thing is the fact that you actually got a very solid game out of Amari Cooper, who has been very up and down as a receiver this year. Now, granted, they've also been, back and forth between Deshaun Watson and PJ Walker, depending on, which quarterback.
Don't forget Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Healthy, and DTR at one point. But, we obviously, a lot of people would like to see Amari Cooper get back in action. So we'll see if that becomes a more consistent theme with Deshaun at QB.
Yeah, and I think another thing where, you get up early, you stay up. I mean, you pitch a shutout, and you really rely heavily on your run game. You get both Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt involved pretty heavily. Jerome Ford making his mark more in the passing game, and Kareem Hunt finding the end zone. So there really wasn't much that the Browns had to do.
No, just exist. That was enough.
But, if the Cardinals were any warm up to what they got next week, heading to Baltimore to face arguably the NFL's best team in the Ravens, good luck.
They've been elite lately.
Yes, and we'll see how Kyler Murray plays against the Falcons. Up next, we have the Commanders and the Patriots, the battle of two teams that aren't very good. Somebody had to win, and because Mac Jones does Mac Jones things, even though the game-sealing interception was probably his best pass of the day and went right through Juju Smith-Schuster's hands, the Commanders win! Yay! And somehow the Commanders are 4-5. Didn't think we'd be here, but then again, these are just the kind of things the Commanders do. They find a way, kind of, question mark.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they exceeded my expectations, since I predicted them to be, particularly atrocious. But it doesn't take much. But I think what it's come down to,
that's kind.
I think what it's come down to for the Commanders is Sam Howell has not been great, but Sam Howell has been flashy. you've seen a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. And that has, turned out to be an overall mediocre season for him. Game in and game out, you've seen great games and you've seen horrible games. This one was kind of somewhere in between, with the fact that he passed for 325 yards, but only found the end zone once.
It took him 45 passes to get there.
Yes, and he also had an interception on the day. So it's like, again, this was a game where somebody had to win. I didn't particularly care. To me, it's funny to see the Patriots, struggle and be kind of atrocious, just because I'm, not a huge Patriots person myself, mostly because of how successful they were. But also, I don't really like seeing the Commanders win either. So,
well, Tim, let me just say my piece, because outside of Packers and Bears fans, the largest contingent of fans that I talk to on a consistent basis just so happen to be Washington Commanders fans. Lucky me. And the way I see it, Super Bowl Sam, as they're calling him.
I'm sorry, what?
He's Super Bowl Sam.
Super Bowl Sam?
He's Super
How
Bowl
about
Sam.
playoff Sam? How about above 500 Sam?
That doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
It doesn't, but it's a good start.
So, he's Super Bowl Sam. I'm not going to argue with the Commanders fans. They're going to say what they're going to. They're going to say what they're going to say.
Whatever they want.
So, the way I see it, looking at Sam Howell, him and Jordan Love are the exact same quarterback. As of right now, they really, there's no difference to player for player. There's really not much difference.
I would say the only difference that I might be able to see is, I guess it probably depends on how the teams run their offense. But we've seen higher passing outputs. But that's also, I guess, true in terms of, you also talk about the receiving core that each team's working with.
Yeah, but that's not player for player. That's other players.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, we've seen a couple of games out of Sam Howell where he's thrown, obviously this one 325.
Sam Howell has better numbers because he has better receivers.
That's what I just said. That's what I just said. The receiving core. I mean, yes, I do believe that.
Yeah, but
we're
not comparing the receiving cores. We're comparing the players individually, and they're pretty much the way I put it is, if Sam Howell was in Green Bay, things would be no better or no worse. And if you put Jordan Love in Washington, things would be no better or no worse. Both of these teams would be very similar. Exact same spots. And
they'd be very similar. You can't say that they'd be in the exact same, because there's just no way that you have the exact same output.
I just did.
But you're right that they are very similar in terms of, with some of the mistakes they're making, the kinds of plays, and the kind of players that they are in terms of,
I think Sam Howell has a little bit more of that dog in him, as Jordan Love.
He's more physical.
Jordan Love has the bigger arm. I
could see that.
The bigger, better arm. I would even argue more accurate arm, given what I've seen of Sam Howell in person. But that's just me. That's my hot take. I don't think the Commanders are in a bad position with Sam Howell. I think you just got to see the thing through. That's all I got. But,
I'd say so. It's
not going to be easy. Got to be patient. You got to trust the process. So in that way, I empathize with Commanders fans, which, is a lot harder to say out loud than, I thought it was going to be.
Say, I'm like, ooh, that's a tough one.
It's not that tough if you just kind of force it out.
Embrace the pain.
Yeah, you embrace the pain, but it is what it is. The Commanders at 4-5 somehow will go to Seattle to play the Seahawks, and the Patriots at 2-7. Oh, they'll go play the Colts. Oh, poor Patriots.
Speaking of the Seahawks, though, oh boy, they don't look good.
No, they don't. Ugh. Yeah, the Seahawks did not look good with their thumping at the hands of the Ravens. Baltimore beat Seattle.
They just look a lot worse in general. They've been
just
struggling a lot more
generally.
As of lately. Lately, the last couple of games they got off to a really hot start, but lately they've looked a step slow on something. Geno hasn't looked
underwhelming.
Great. Yeah, it really has for a team that showed a lot of promise towards the beginning of the season, to where some teams were talking about the Seahawks in starting to get some serious contender conversations in the NFC, and now they're
Yeah,
No,
not if
not
they keep playing like this.
well, not if your leading receiver is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, great to see him get involved more, but he should not be your
Well,
leading receiver.
that's not an indictment. You spent a first round pick on him, but
Yeah, but DK Metcalf can't have one reception, even if it's one reception for 50 yards. You can't have that happen and be a successful
yeah,
team.
but that's the point. That is, you
Yeah,
can't have your freak of nature superstar wide receiver be ignored like that. And
yeah.
Geno
Well, and
Smith just
three for 32 out of Lockett isn't much better.
well, Geno Smith 13 completions on 28 attempts. Like you can't
Yeah.
live with that. You can't live below a 50% completion percentage. Everybody that's been yelling at me about Jordan Love's completion percentages told me that. Although, even though completion percentages for absolute nerds, go touch some grass, it's very evident that Geno Smith did not have a good game.
Yeah. I mean, overall, the team just didn't have a good game. I mean, Kenneth Walker was abysmal.
But let's talk about the Ravens, though. We need some more
It's a lot to
positivity.
talk for them.
They
Oh
look
boy.
excellent. They look like one of the NFL's best teams, and a lot of them are calling them at the midway point the AFC's representative in the Super Bowl. Is that an overreaction? TBD. I think maybe, but I can see
There's
it
still
happening.
so much football to be played.
Yeah.
I mean, every time we come out and start naming teams as like the best team in the NFL mid-season or before mid-season, like so much can change. All it can take is one or two injuries the wrong way, can entirely derail a season. So they are playing super, super well.
Yeah, but
It's
like
super
the
fun to
Ravens
see.
have a
But
Pro Bowl backup, so it doesn't matter.
hey, Tyler Huntley came in and looked solid for his time while he was in. 5 for 7, only passed for 38 yards, but got the lone passing touchdown for
More
them for the day.
touchdowns
But
than Lamar.
they ran the ball all over the Seahawks. I was astonished. They ran, I believe what I calculated up was 297 yards on the ground
Something
as a
like
team.
that.
That is insane.
Oh, it was
Like,
absurd.
yeah, I mean, obviously, massive game out of Keaton Mitchell, who broke multiple big runs, ended up with nine carries for 138 yards,
Like Devin
and a
A-Chain
touchdown.
levels.
Yeah. And of course, other guys, continue to break away. Lamar did his thing on the ground. You got Gus Edwards continuing to find the end zone for him, which, was cool for him. Sucks for me as a Lamar Jackson fantasy owner when they keep handing the ball off towards the end zone. But overall, they looked
I
very
mean,
solid.
if they keep doing that next week and Lamar Jackson gets no touchdowns, I'll be okay with it.
I would be upset. I'd be sad.
I mean, as long as I beat you, I don't care. That's all that matters. For context, we play each other in fantasy football next week, but that's neither here nor there.
That'll be a fun time.
Oh,
I
that'll be a
think
fun battle.
one of the interesting things and fun things from this one is you saw Odell Beckham Jr. Be the recipient of the only touchdown through the air in this game on his birthday, which also happened to be your birthday.
No way.
Yeah, crazy.
The Packers won on my birthday? What? Jordan Love played well on my
just
birthday?
for you, man.
What?
Just for you.
I'm so honored. But either way.
The Ravens look dominant. And the question is will they be able to keep it up? I think I'm less so worried about the offensive side of the ball, and I'm more intrigued by whether or not they can keep up an elite defensive side of the ball, because that's what's going to make the difference in this AFC.
What we've learned, the Ravens are really, really good. They can run the ball really, really well. The Seahawks have not played well. And because I share a birthday with the guy that has the greatest catch in NFL history, that means I also have some of the greatest hands this side of the Mississippi. Don't fact check it.
Source, trust me, bro.
I'm an excellent receiver. Source, trust. The Ravens at 7-2 have a divisional matchup against the Browns, and the Seahawks will go play the Commanders. But this next game we have, that was a
game of the week.
Game of the week. The Buccaneers and the Texans. CJ Stroud is here. He plays football and literally nothing else. He don't need no tests. He just slings the ball around to any receivers that are open.
CJ Stroud, football guy.
CJ Stroud, big football guy in the 39-37 victory. Before we talk about the Texans, I want to talk about the fight that the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield showed. Baker Mayfield also had himself a fantastic day. Just because he got overshadowed by perhaps the best rookie performance ever, that doesn't mean that, Baker Mayfield shouldn't get his flowers, because he deserves absolutely all of it. I mean, hanging 37 more often than not, you win that football game. So,
Yeah.
nothing to hang your head about if you're Tampa Bay.
No, I mean he put them in a great position to win. I mean you go up by what was it 4 or 3
Like a minute
with
left.
46 seconds left was that final drive for the Texans. So at the end of the day, he played very solid, got his guys involved, found Kate Otten in the end zone twice. And they had some pretty good success on the ground. So overall, you really can't complain much about the Buccaneers for the offensive side of the ball. I mean, when you give up 39, you can complain a little bit about the defensive side of the ball, but how much of that is the defense, being poor, or the Texans just clicking on all cylinders? Because the Texans had 3 100-yard plus receivers, and that's crazy. And one of them being Dalton Schultz as a tight end. So they looked absolutely incredible. Really, the main reason why CJ Stroud put up those numbers that he did, or one of the main reasons, because they got nothing going on the ground. So they literally just forced to pass all game. Well, that's the thing. If you're going to pass that well, you're right. Who does need to? But really interesting. You saw like Noah Brown being the leading receiver for them in terms of yards. So Noah Brown, Dalton
the
Schultz,
former
and
Cowboys
Tank Dell.
around the league, absolutely showing out. We're going to talk about the day CeeDee Lamb had later. We already talked about Amari Cooper, Noah Brown, and Dalton Schultz for the Texans, absolutely going bonkers. The 4 leading receivers from this week were all teammates on the Cowboys at one point. So
crazy.
That's
crazy.
Like the rest of America says, suck at Cowboys. But I mean, what does it say about CJ Stroud? Like, people are already saying, oh, top 10 quarterback in the league right now. Like,
I've heard people say MVP candidate. I'm like,
MVP
whoa.
candidate. I mean, clear cut rookie of the year. I mean,
it's far and away. Yeah.
You and I are guys that will always say pump the brakes, but I'm gonna hype up CJ Stroud a little bit, because I know I've been a big Ohio State non-believer in terms of like the quarterbacks that they produced. And, I mean, CJ Stroud is the exception. Like, he is a good one. He is a gem. Like,
he looks legit.
This is Herbert right out the gate, just slinging it all over the place, looking fantastic. I mean, he's only got 1 pick on the year.
And he looks confident. I think that's what it comes down to, is he looks confident. A lot of rookies, when they come in, is, you don't really know what to expect. You're trying to do a whole lot of adjusting to life in the NFL. He has picked it up quickly.
He's poised. He's a leader. The team rallied around him from day one. Like, I read a story about like the dynamic in the quarterback room, how like him, Davis Mills, and 35-year-old Case Keenum have gelled together really well. And, it's the start of a bright future for the Texans at quarterback, permitted, everything goes well. Again, NFL, you never know.
But anything can happen, but
absolutely anything can happen. But like, this is like, I'm going to say it, that CJ Stroud is like on pace even right now to be the best quarterback in Texans franchise history.
Yeah, that's not even that crazy to say, to be honest.
It's more so because like the best quarterback in Texans franchise history is either Matt Schaub or Deshaun Watson. So, if CJ Stroud can stay like 10 years and have, a few Pro Bowls here and there, maybe an All-Pro, throw an MVP in there. Yeah, just greatest Texans quarterback of all time. But
legit.
Guy's a stud.
We'll see how he continues to grow. I mean, obviously, this is an outstanding performance. He's also had ones, much more mediocre this year. You expect those highs and lows.
But it's never been bad.
No, and that's the thing. It has never been bad. When you throw 1 interception through the entirety of the first half of the season as a rookie quarterback, that's insane. That is still really, really good.
It's nuts.
So you have nothing to complain about if you're a Texans fan in terms of the trajectory of this team. To see this type of improvement this year, and some of the flashes and great play. And also, you talk about CJ Stroud elevating some of his receivers. If you look at the Texans receiving core, you don't immediately go, oh my gosh, this team is like
Nico Collins and Tank Dell. Oh, wow.
Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Noah Brown, Dalton Schultz. Like, it's a group of guys that he has made the most out of thus far and made them look better than a lot of quarterbacks would be, and maybe
that's the mark,
better than they actually are.
That's the mark of a good quarterback, the ability to elevate the guys
around you,
just being a leader. And Stroud is showing everything that you want to see. The Texans at 4-4 go to Cincinnati to take on Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Meanwhile, the Bucs will play the Titans. Up next, we have the Indianapolis Colts and the Carolina Panthers, where, gosh, the Panthers are struggling, and Bryce Young is struggling
Yeah, yeah.
bad. 3 interceptions, a pair of pick sixes to Kenny Moore, and it's just not looking great.
The only guy on the
This
Panthers team that
especially,
has more receiving touchdowns from Bryce Young than Kenny Moore is Adam Thielen by 1 touchdown.
yeah, and that's a
Adam
sad
Thielen has
statistic.
3, Kenny Moore has 2.
And talking about the Texans and the Panthers back to back, about how well CJ Stroud has done, and about how much Bryce Young has struggled, really makes you think that, like, what if the Panthers had taken Stroud at 1 and not Bryce
Yeah.
Young? And but that would be an alternate upside down wacko universe that we don't live
The
in.
NFL what if?
Yeah, I mean, maybe Anthony Richardson's still healthy and like running over guys, but he's not. And we have Gardner Minshew doing just enough Gardner Minshew things to win. But
Yeah.
with the Colts, the main thing to notice, other than the defense stepping up huge, is Jonathan Taylor taking over the backfield as the clear RB1. You got 23 touches, a receiving touchdown. It's his backfield now. I mean, that doesn't mean Zach Moss isn't dismissed. Like, still to this thing,
There's
still an
still
awesome back,
expectations. There's still
but
expectations for Zach Moss to have a part of that backfield in terms of, like, you got 7 carries in this one. He'll probably still be getting closer to double-digit carries in a lot of these games just to do change of pace, just to try to keep Jonathan Taylor healthy. Because when you pay a guy, and when he's that big of a part of your team, you want to keep him as healthy as possible. And because of how good Zach Moss played in the absence of Jonathan Taylor for a lot of those games, they're definitely going to want to keep him involved more and more. But especially with Jonathan Taylor's his usage in the passing game, I think that really proves his value and how much he's going to be a key focal point for this offense going forward, especially under Gardner Minshew, where they do like to go a little bit more underneath than truly air it out all the time, which makes sense, and clearly here it worked for him. So you don't see a super stellar stat line from Gardner Minshew, but when you put up 27 points and beat the Panthers by 2 touchdowns, you don't need Gardner Minshew to be super flashy. You don't need him 470 yards and 4 touchdowns or whatever.
yeah, the Colts at 4-5, they will travel to Foxborough to take on the Patriots, and the Panthers have a Thursday night showdown with the Chicago Bears. So the Bears are basically playing for both of their picks. You might as well go win it. Like, you're stuck with a good draft situation either way.
I guess, but then also for the Bears, if you win, you're putting your own draft pick a little bit lower while keeping the Panthers up there. You would probably get even them out a little bit closer if you let the Panthers.
That's the exact kind of losers mentality that I expect from Chicago sports. We're gonna move on to the New York Giants and the Las Vegas Raiders. And what an interesting season it's been for both of these teams, dude. Both of these teams signed quarterbacks, either contracts or extensions, and now they have rookies playing, with Aiden O'Connell for the Raiders and Tommy DeVito
good old Tommy DeVito
for the Giants, because Daniel Jones is Daniel Dunn. Torn ACL.
Yeah, that's tough.
Signs that hefty
That's not
contract,
what you want to see.
doesn't play well. I mean, it's a nightmare season. Like, it's when bad turns to worse, and there's really not much you can do about it.
I will say, though, obviously a lot of things have happened. In general, the play has been bad, but I really, really point towards a lot of their issues stemming from this atrocious offensive line. Not only do you cause issues, and I won't say the injury to Saquon Barkley earlier this year could be a result of that.
It's so important.
But I will say that this injury to Daniel Jones could very well be from it. It may not have been, on specifically a play where he got hit because of the offensive line being bad, but he is constantly taking hits, running for his life, and eventually it caught up to him. And it's not what you want to see. Yeah, and now Tommy DeVito has to face the consequences, but they really have to make some major changes to that offensive line if they want to be a successful team.
I remember when you and I sat down and watched a random Purdue versus Illinois football game, and the quarterbacks were Aiden O'Connell
and
Tommy DeVito. How things have come full circle in the NFL in the most unexpected ways. But let's talk about the Raiders firing Josh McDaniels, and however crazy that was. I think he might come
Apparently,
after us.
we're
Dude,
the
he's gonna come
team.
after us for talking about the Patriots. He's gonna get us.
There's a lot of
Spoke
if
ill
people out
about
there
New
have
England. Oh
not,
no.
yeah, if people out there have not gone and looked into some of the sort of altercations and conversations that surrounded that last week before Josh McDaniels was
It's an
fired,
adventure.
read into that because it is a very, very interesting story. And you could tell just how different this Raiders team was on the field and off the field following essentially this, revamp within their organization. And on the field, they looked a lot more just together. They played a lot better overall.
They'll run
But
through a
off the
brick
field,
wall for Antonio Pierce.
yes, and off the field they look way happier. They look way more, having each other's backs. Like they're enjoying being a part of that organization right now, and that's huge. I think you see a little bit. Obviously, this is only 1 week, but I can see the glimpses of the former, essentially Raiders turnaround season under Rich Bisaccia in this performance thus far from the Raiders. And
All right.
I can see it
All
because
right.
you see the massive improvement right away, not just based on how they play on the field, but because the fact that they have a different fire under them now. And we'll see how this turns out for them going forward.
I'm trying to see the vision. I don't yet, because they put
Only
up 30
time will
points.
tell.
Yeah, they played well.
I mean, yes, keep in mind, this is again against an atrocious Giants team. I get it. They're really, really bad. So it'll be interesting to see how they play going forward. But I think in general, there's something to be said about, wanting to represent that logo on your uniform, that logo on your helmet, and what it means to go out there and truly give it everything because you trust the guys at the top. And I think they have that now. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a magical turnaround for them, but I think you're going to see a lot more consistent, a lot more competitive of a Raiders team going forward.
That's fair. I think they're finally proud to be Las Vegas Raiders. So, and
they think they can beat anybody.
They're sitting at 4-5, and they go play the Jets on Sunday Night Football. So, this is an opportunity to prove themselves. And the Giants,
stacking wins.
The Giants, on the other hand, at 2-7, they go face Dak and the Cowboys. So that
things are going downhill fast.
Yes, it is. Speaking of Dak and those Cowboys, they came up just short against the Philadelphia Eagles, 28-23, and just it's a typical Cowboys Eagles matchup with a lot of rivalry, a lot of tempers, and a lot of complaining.
A lot of back and forth.
A lot of complaining from both sides, from both incredibly irritable fan bases, and the rest of America is just telling them to shut up, even though we know darn well you're right, it's never going away. But these are two likely NFC playoff teams that could meet up later on down the line in January, and with games
would it be fun to see these teams against each other in the playoffs?
It only sets the stage for what could be a special matchup, and like the positives from both sides. Dak, aside from a few mistakes, played
a few key mistakes at that. I mean, obviously people have been quick to
mistakes.
Yes, I say more timely than anything. But I mean, obviously people are always going to be quick to point that out. People who aren't fans of Cowboys, which is pretty much the rest of the league, they're always quick.
It's Dak Prescott.
They are always quick to point out Dak's downfalls and his mistakes. But overall, if you look at the way he played a very solid game.
Throwing it to CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, throwing it for 374 yards and 3 touchdowns, 191 of those yards going to CeeDee Lamb on 11 receptions. Overall, you can't ask for a whole lot more out of that offense. I think what it comes down to is the Eagles also have a good offense, and they are hard to stop too. And that's what I think what showed in this game is even with them being able to get the Eagles to falter a little bit here and there. They held steady and were able to come away with that win.
Yeah, I think it was a very gutsy performance from Jalen Hurts, who's nursing an injury, and it's always you always gear up for those special rivalry games and you kind of turn it
Just
up another
just means
notch.
more.
And to go out and get the win and advance to 8-1 going into the bye at the halfway point, I think is huge. The
Oh,
Eagles
absolutely.
for sure control their own destiny in the NFC. And the Cowboys on the other side, they don't like the Giants that much either. So, they'll have an opportunity to really bounce back in a big way. Got
I
two
could
more.
definitely see that one being a big beat down.
Yeah,
Releasing
yeah,
some
like
some
that's
negative energy on the Cowboys side and the Giants just being helpless to stop it.
you know, it's like a replay of, the last few Giants Cowboys matchups. Ugh. But we got two more games left to go. On Sunday Night Football, the Bills and the Bengals. The Bills mounted a little bit of a comeback there in the final quarter. However,
Yeah.
the Bengals stamping their mark and they're proving that they're still among the elite in the AFC. And all the early season rust that we saw from Joe Burrow and T. Higgins just went away because Joe Burrow is playing Joe Burrow ball. And like it's the little blips. How do you respond? Because everybody's freaking out about the Bengals. Oh my goodness, are they gonna falter? Is Joe Burrow terrible? You know, let him heal from that calf injury all the way, and then just let Joey franchise go ball.
Yeah, I mean they've bounced back in significant fashion. I think the big part of it in my mind is the difference in quarterback play when Joe Burrow has been healthy versus when he was trying to play through the remnants of that calf injury. So he looked very good in this game. He's looked very good recently. Obviously great for them to get T. Higgins back involved. They have the receivers between Jamar, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd to really do some damage depending on who was the guy in that game. They got T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd involved just as much, if not more, than Jamar in this one specifically. And overall, I think despite this game ending 24-18, wasn't quite as close for a decent amount of that second half there than the score quite shows, because the Bills got that last touchdown and a 2-point conversion with inside of 2 minutes in the fourth quarter there, and then the Bengals were able to run out the clock. But overall, the Bengals have reestablished themselves. They're stacking some wins, playing good football. The key for them is keep everybody healthy and keep moving in the right direction. Obviously, they're pretty comfortable in terms of being in a decent place to control their own destiny heading to the playoffs. But they
Well, it depends on how the rest of the rest. English is
the west of
the,
the AFC.
the rest of the AFC. Yeah.
It does. I mean, it does
It's the
truly
rest of
depend,
no,
but
it's just the rest of the AFC North, that division,
that's
because
also
all
true.
four
That division has
teams
been
are
insane right
poised
now.
to make the playoffs right now. So, hey, if you have 3 wild card spots and they're all taken up by your own division rivals, there's
Yeah,
really
that
less
can get
margin for
complicated.
error. And especially if you got Buffalo knocking on the door at 5-4, who aren't in the playoff picture at the moment, they're
Yeah,
going to be
it's crazy.
hungry to get back on track. The
It's
Bengals
gonna be tightly contested.
will take on the Texans, and the Bills will take on the Broncos in Monday Night Football. Oh boy, America, we're sorry. Speaking of the own Monday Night Football game, the Chargers and the Jets, a very anticlimactic end to the week. A
This one wasn't too close.
27-6 beat down. I mean, and the Chargers made it look easy. The Jets looked inept. That offensive line is terrible. The problems that the Jets always had reared its ugly head. And when the Chargers offense shows up and yours doesn't, it's not easy to win a football
Yeah,
game. I think the most exciting thing from that game is Aaron Rodgers throwing 50-yard bombs like 56
in
days post
pregame. Yeah,
injury. I mean, like, hey, good for him. Would I recommend coming back this season with that offensive
no,
line and that receiving
no,
core? Like,
no.
no, I wouldn't do it. But, hey, good for Aaron for still having something to prove. I don't know what it is,
I mean,
but
regardless of what it is to prove, I mean, it's good to see. You like seeing the guy
it's
coming back
fun.
and getting healthy. It's cool
I'm
to
happy
see.
to see Aaron back on the
Um,
field.
but yeah, the Jets just. I mean, at the end of the day, when you make Zach Wilson throw the ball 49 times, it's not going to end up pretty well for
God.
you.
Oh God.
That's just not a good recipe for success. And part of
No.
that struggle is the fact that that offensive line struggling so much. First of all, they went down early, so obviously you're climbing out of a deficit for the whole game. But even when they did run the ball, it's a lot more difficult to get the running game going, which then can help your passing game. So overall, things went bad quickly and stayed bad. The Jets don't really
Pretty
have
accurate way to describe it. And I got nothing more on this game in general, other
yeah,
than I know how much you love your Austin Eckler multi-touchdown day, but
hey, obviously not a super flashy day, but finding the end zone twice is always good for him, keeping Keenan Allen going. But again, they made it pretty easy. But hey, Keenan Allen hitting 10,000 receiving yards on that crazy catch toward the sideline there, where you had to do a little twist and roll on the catch. But
twist and shout, twist and shout.
yeah, we'll see what version of the Chargers we continue to see going forward. They're another team that kind of feels a little bit similar to the Dolphins in terms of we can beat up on bad teams and pretend that we're good, and then when they face teams of almost any decent caliber, they struggle.
You say bad teams, but the Jets are also 4-4 somehow, and so are the Chargers. But we'll see what happens going forward. The Chargers will face the Lions, and the Jets go play the Raiders on Sunday Night Football. But that's all we got for our Week 9 NFL recap. If you want to watch any of our other recaps throughout the season, we have all of those along with lots of NFL content. We have other sports, especially college basketball. College hoops is back, and we're going to be so hyped to bring you more college hoops content and anything else you want to see. So until next time, we out.